Hi everybody, I'm Kim Winter. I'm your host today. And before we start, please don't hesitate to go to Logistics Executive TV on YouTube to look at our other podcasts that we're running in this series. Today I'd like to welcome Rob Hango-Zada. Hey Rob.
G'day Kim, how are you mate?
Good mate, thanks for coming along. And Rob is the co-founder and joint CEO of APAC's fastest growing shipping platform, Shippit. I think, Rob, first time I ran into you was probably well over a decade ago when we were on the speaking circuit in various parts of APAC. And probably you'll tell us the story, but I think in those days, early in the e-commerce world and certainly early in the link up with retail in Australia. So really looking forward to speaking with you today. Why don't you give us a bit of a heads up on your personal journey in supply chain, Rob, and then we'll get into it and talk a little bit about Shippit and what's going on in the market in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, terrific, Kim. We did run into each other a fair few times, different warehousing and logistics conferences, and it's weird to say, but I'd love to be back in those places at the moment, considering COVID's kind of put an end to a lot of that networking right now. So, but this is good; it gives us a chance to talk.
Right.
Mate, look, the personal journey front is quite an interesting one. I am somebody who didn't have a career in logistics or retail, but decided to build a company in logistics and retail and technology at the same time.
Just to see what would happen.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of naivety to kind of take on a big industry which you know nothing about kind of helps in the beginning, and then you hit the oh shit moment when you realize what you don't know. But look, I think. It's been a really great journey to date. We've done some really cool things in terms of changing the industry and challenging the incumbents to kind of do better for the end customer. E-commerce is certainly reshaping the logistics world in a big way, from point to point and, business to business to one point to many and business to consumer. It wreaks havoc on supply chains, on a global basis. So co-founder of mine, Will, and I have been best mates for the last 17 years. So we met each other in uni, for better or for worse. We've been really close mates ever since. And I always joke that I spend more time with him than I do my own wife. The good thing is we've figured out, how to manage our kind of dynamic really well. And I've been quite fortunate to be able to work with a good mate of mine in sort of building the business up. I think, we started out in humble beginnings probably about 6 years ago to solve the problem of the missed delivery calling card. I guess that we saw as a core failure point of the industry. And we looked to solve the consumer experience and actually found that the problem existed in kind of the merchant sender world and the logistics infrastructure that supplies or powers the movement of parcels is a big area of focus for us now. So, that's kind of been the journey today.
Okay. And what were the steps you took as entrepreneurs? And I think it's always interesting talking about business partnerships. And entrepreneurs, it's the success rate of partners, whether they be 2, 3 or more, staying together over the journey. We look back to the likes of Google and Facebook and what have you. Quite often there are casualties. How have you, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the business, what are the learnings that you could pass on about maintaining those types of relationships? As you say, quite often. Longer in terms of an hours in the day than a personal home relationship. So what are the tips you've got for anybody who's in startups or enduring partnerships at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest value adds of a partnership is that, we're all up and down at variable points in the day, right? So, don't come talk to me before I have my coffee. Come talk to me right after I've had it, and I'll be a great person to talk to. Will, on the other hand, is really good before he has his coffee, and then he gets really extreme after that. So I think, the one key learning is, make sure you have a level of chemistry with your business partner. So much so that you can be brutally honest with one another. The benefit of a partnership means you can be down while the other is up, and they can be down while you're up. So you have this consistent flow of energy and movement within a business. That has been really the secret that's propelled us further than we've seen some of our peers at the same time. The impact that has on our team means that we're always on, which can be a bit challenging, but it helps us push for kind of a better outcome. On the point of chemistry, I often see a lot of business partners form together over a common problem that haven't necessarily built a relationship first. And as I said, you're spending more time, you spend 8 to 10 hours a day talking to your partner in the early days, and then that invariably becomes phone calls wherever you can fit them. And you have to spend a lot of time disagreeing as well. If you can't disagree with a partner, you can't change. And if you can't change, you won't grow. And if you don't grow, the business ultimately won't succeed. So one of the real benefits of the relationship Will and I have is we can be brutally honest with one another. We can call bullshit on one another at any point in time without offending the other person, which I think is really important. In fact, I just jumped off a call with him, which is why I was a little bit late to joining you, where we disagreed about something and we made sure that our voice was clear and we kind of agreed on the path forward. What I've seen in some other co-founder relationships that have been arranged is without that chemistry, you just don't have those conversations, and that manifests itself in different ways. Excellent. But yeah, that would be kind of one of the core things I would recommend starting out.
I'm sort of thinking, your backup job could be marriage counsellor as well. You're applying those same rules, right?
Absolutely.
Partnership counsel, especially during the COVID period when everybody's been in forced lockdown and what have you. And I'm sure in Melbourne, where are you, Melbourne or Sydney?
We're Sydney based.
Yeah, you're in Sydney.
Thankfully, at the moment, yeah. But we have a team that's spread a bit far up. But fortunately, Will and I are Sydney based.
Certainly not as tough going in Sydney as the folks down in Melbourne. So hi to everybody in Melbourne, and commiserations on your lockdown. But I hear that things are improving there, so great news. And I'm sure everybody's going to want to be moving further than the rudimentary 5 kilometres from their home very soon. So let's get back to it, Rob. So you've been, I think you're corporate, Procter & Gamble, Unilever for a good decade or so before you decided to branch out and do your own thing and solve that customer problem. What were the starting points for you? How did you get the business cranked up? Did you have to seek other funding? Were you guys able to fund it yourselves? How did you reach out and get your first customers?
Yeah, so if I cast my mind back to 2014, which was really when Will and I were sharing a beer one night, as we usually would, and we just started talking about things. And one of those things that we spoke about was a really crappy delivery experience that Will had. He was trying to get a vacuum cleaner delivered, and his house was about 30 minutes out from the CBD in Sydney here. And he was at work in the CBD, working for PwC at the time. The courier had called him and said, "I've got a delivery for you, mate." And he said, "Well, I'm not home. Just leave it on the doorstep." He said, "I don't have authority to leave. You're going to have to call the retailer." And so this whole rigmarole ensued, which eventually ended up in Will driving his car, into the city, paying for parking, going down to the mailroom in PwC, having a delivery sent or redirected, which came at a cost to the retailer and the courier, to take that vacuum cleaner from 30 minutes out into the CBD, delivering this massive Dyson box into a mailroom, which is about 2 by 2 meters, with a mailroom guy, shaking his head at Will saying, "What are you doing here, mate?" That experience in itself kind of underscored the challenge that we started to think about, which was, well, e-commerce is growing at a rate of knots. And if the delivery experience is as hard as that for a vacuum cleaner, just imagine what it's like for a fridge, a couch, a TV, anything else. And we really need to try and remove some friction if we want to grow it. So going from idea to concept to execution took us about 12 months, if I'm honest. We spent a lot of time speaking to people, obviously not domain experts ourselves. We spoke to retailers, couriers, investors, people in finance, end customers, family members, you name it. We just went on a rampage to fully understand the problem. And I think the benefit of investing your time in understanding the problem means you don't become obsessed with an idea. It's a really important tip for anyone who's starting a business to remember is if you are passionate about an idea can fail, but a problem will always persist. So focusing on that problem meant we could pivot the idea as we got more feedback and we learned and responded. So fast forward to 2015, when we kind of launched the business officially, we had built out an on-demand 3-hour delivery company. We'd bootstrapped that, so it meant we funded it ourselves. Yep. We weren't willing to knock on family and friends' doors for money just yet. And we kind of made ourselves a bit of an agreement. So we kept pushing this thing along as we had our full-time jobs. And we made an agreement with one another that we would jump in if we had a paying customers technology that actually worked, and the prospect of funding on the horizon. So we took the leap, and then we secured funding from a super angel in the early days, who was an introduction from a friend of a friend. And then that formed part of our seed financing round, which then allowed us to employ staff, pay ourselves a very modest salary, and get the business going.
Good stuff. So, I think we've seen a lot of media about, there's a lot of startups around the world, and our audience and all the different countries that people join us from will have seen a lot of startups, and a lot of the organisations which are well established in online e-commerce, especially from retail, have been booming. There's a lot of boom results around. Of course, it's not all beer and Skittles and success, but I would like to hear from you guys about how COVID has affected yourselves, and give us a bit of an insight into what sort of volumes have been coming through and how you've managed and dealt with that situation.
Yeah, look, Kim, it's a really interesting one. So I think a little bit of context around the business model that we have might be helpful as I kind of go into this next part. But Shippit's a technology platform that coordinates logistics for retailers. So the problem that we're really solving is, how do we match make the order information with the courier capabilities without thinking? So opinionated by default, we're connecting retailers to carriers and carriers to their customers, and wrapping that journey all behind a really lovely consolidated tracking experience powered by the retailer's brand. So we're empowering retailers to really own that experience. So obviously, being really deeply connected into retail, when COVID hit, the market kind of started to shudder along a little bit. We weren't quite sure where we'd end up. We took a view that was quite pessimistic, and we're a venture-backed business. And as a venture-backed business, you're investing quite heavily in growth. So you're operating at a pretty significant loss every month to ensure the next month's results do come in. And so the moment that we started to observe what was going on globally, we heard some reports out of China, prior to Chinese New Year and then into Chinese New Year, et cetera. We knew it was going to be a pretty big deal. So from about mid-February, we decided to shut our office, and we were 100% remote working from that point. And it was probably a month later when the government directive was to get everybody to work from home around the lockdowns. At that time, we also started to project out a few different scenarios, and our view at the time was quite pessimistic. So we needed to really protect the business, save as many jobs as possible, extend our financial runway, and get going. So we made some really crucial decisions. We threw our strategy out of the window, and we focused on cost control at all costs, with a view to get to profitability really quickly. And within the quarter, what started to happen was lockdowns were put in place. We then saw a lot of home office setups, home gym setups, a lot of people getting ready to work from home. And then obviously, as physical retail was shut down as an option to buy, the only way to purchase was online. And then the COVID boom hit. And so it really hit us by surprise. But thankfully, we're used to the elasticity of demand in e-commerce with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and what that can do to your network. So our technology was ready, and we had the right capabilities. And in fact, what was quite fortunate for us is, as the increased delivery volume started to melt supply chain networks of the larger carriers, we had optionality on our platform to provide some relief to those bottlenecks. So COVID's been a real boon for our business in terms of seeing the volumes come through, but more importantly, it's been a boon for our retailers because they've been able to maintain agility. They could use shutdown stores as distribution centers that could still operate, so they could still employ staff to go and fulfill items from store, and a number of other things. So we're still going through that journey. Victoria's lockdown has been another one, where we've seen e-commerce demand just continuing to surge. But even then, whilst lockdown restrictions have eased across Australia, we're still seeing demand, holding at a very high level versus what it was pre-COVID.
Okay. How have omni-channel retailers been responding to the COVID scenario, especially in Melbourne?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting with the omnichannel retail space. Obviously, seeing the acceleration of digital over the last few years has kind of meant the purpose of the store has shifted. If you followed Accent Group's journey locally, who are a prominent footwear, whole group that runs all the major footwear brands in Australia, they've done an excellent job of transforming their stores into experience centres and leveraging them as distribution centres. So they were kind of ahead of the curve. A lot of omnichannel retailers that still saw online as a completely separate store or channel versus their stores, they've struggled a bit, and it's COVID really hit them by surprise. Fortunately, a lot of the merchants that are on the Shippit platform had already seen the opportunity to leverage store networks as fulfillment centers or micro DCs. So we just helped accelerate that migration. So for omnichannel retailers, the role of the store has shifted from one where you sell to customers directly to one where you sell to customers online and use your store as a fulfillment location. And that's been a godsend for a lot of omnichannel retailers. And we've seen a great deal of resilience through omnichannel networks, as opposed to, some of the pure play retailers that have really bottlenecked in sort of DCs because they don't have many options.
Sure. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of media around experience centres and their transformation in that omnichannel space, of course. That sort of leads us to segue into further technology. What's your view on how technology has come into play in regards to driving growth during, pretty uncertain times? What sort of technology are you seeing having an impact on supply chain?
I'm definitely seeing a lot more optionality. So I think, the big thematic is flexibility and speed of change. When you think about business continuity practices through uncertain times, retailers need optionality. So we're seeing a lot more redundancy being built in. So if I have a DC, I want to make sure that a store is available for dispatch, or I want to make sure I have an alternate DC. Because if you have a COVID infection in one, that complete operation shuts down. You can't service your customer demand. So there's a lot of risk around that. I can't speak to a lot of the automation, but I have noticed an acceleration in investments in tech, particularly around stores which didn't have online presence before. Now, who would have thought in 2020 you don't have an online presence? And seeing retailers starting to move more aggressively into that space. Okay. I think the final point on innovation through these uncertain times is, the focus on expanding your product offering has been a really interesting thing. So we've seen an increase in dropshipping as a result as well. So, every retailer is now selling sanitizers and face masks because they sell really well, but also where that's fulfilled from could differ. And so that's where dropship becomes a really important play. Give our
audience a description of dropshipping for those who are not familiar with the term.
Yeah. So dropshipping is and I might get the official definition wrong, but it's where you have a retail brand, which is the destination, that handles the transaction and is the retailer of record or the business of record for the customer. But they may allocate it directly to a vendor or supplier of those products to fulfill the items directly from their warehouse to the end customer without being identified, I guess. So that explains drop shipping in a way. It's how Amazon's marketplace works, how eBay works, I guess, and any marketplace that you see out there that doesn't own the products themselves but sells them on behalf of a merchant.
Sure, no issues. So give us, before we wrap up, give us a bit of a heads up on where you see last mile going to. I mean, inshallah, God willing, we will move through this phase. Let's all be hoping we're closer to the end of the year this year than into next year, when we have these severe lockdowns all around the world, and a lot of countries are struggling more than others. I see Qantas in the media overnight talking about, not really cranking up their international flights for another 2 to 3 years. but at the same time, you know, a very resilient company that's diversified and dealt with disruption pretty well from an Australian company point of view. But from your perspective, and I know the way you think is very global as well, talk to us a little bit about what you see happening with last mile. What are going to be the major drivers for innovation and development in last mile, and how you see us coming through this phase, and will things go back to what they were with last mile before, or we pass that and into innovative changes which are going to move us into the future?
Kim, I think that the core challenge for the logistics industry is that e-commerce is still at its infancy, right? And so what does that actually mean? So let's lay out some of the macro trends, right? Macro trend number one, uncertainty is a constant. In Australia alone, over the last 12 months, we've had natural disasters in terms of the worst bushfires we've seen in a very long time. We've had cyber attacks on some prominent logistics providers as well, which have persisted for more than 4 to 6 weeks, which meant they couldn't even take a booking and they couldn't deliver a parcel, reliably. And then you've got COVID, a pandemic that's not likely to go away, fully anytime soon. Yeah. So dealing with uncertainty is one area. The second piece is you have a growing population, and that growing population will obviously, we'll see an increase in digital penetration as generations start to shift and start to buy online. Gen Z, I think, is the generation that was born with a mobile in their hand. They don't know any other way but e-commerce. So as we start to see maturity in those spaces, and then I think, the third piece is, this digitization and this, immediacy of demand is another macro trend that will impact last mile. So without rambling too much, effectively what these three big vectors tell us is there's going to be a hell of a lot more uncertainty in the market. So we need better optionality. You can't rely on humans, and also the volume that will start to be pumping through the e-commerce space is not only going to double, it will more than likely triple or quadruple depending on where you are in the world. E-commerce penetration as a percentage of total retail sits at around 10 to 20% in some markets, but globally probably at about 10 to 12%. And if you think about, dialing that up to 50% of retail, it's going to wreak absolute havoc on supply chain networks. I think I attended a talk at South by Southwest last year on logistics, and UPS came out and said, in the next 10 years, there won't be enough humans to move the amount of parcels through their networks based on the US population alone. This tells us that the innovation trends that we will see is massive increases in automation, massive increases in localized fulfillment. So micro fulfillment centers in neighborhoods, more consolidation across networks, because today we see a lot of collaboration across logistics networks with carrier A using carrier B as a handoff point. But that's not a dynamic process right now. And in order for the market to scale as it is, you're going to need to see capacity connected from all different types of carriers and logistics pieces of infrastructure that are out there. So we see greater connectivity, greater automation, and the ability to be more agile as the key trends in innovation. I'd love to say drones and laser beams are going to be the main thing. Drones have a purpose, but I think autonomous vehicles will be more likely in our next 5 to 10 year horizon, particularly for line haul.
Good stuff. Hey, before I let you go, couple of quick fire question answers. One that I ask everybody is, when you're looking for talent to bring into your own organisation, what are the 2 or 3 things that you immediately look for in the talent that you're looking to recruit into Shippit?
Curiosity and resilience, Kim.
Love it.
They're the 2 main traits we look for.
Yeah, cool. Very good. And the next one is, you're a fairly high-profile entrepreneur in the Australian supply chain market. But even if you pan out and think about just the other business entrepreneurs, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could contribute to people's mindsets, whether they're just getting into business or they're in business and they might be pushing it uphill a little bit? What are the 2 or 3 contributions and thoughts you could share with our audience?
I think that pushing it uphill is a constant piece for many people in business. I'm sure you can attest to, Kim. It's a constant battle. I think if you're not a fan of anxiety and midnight thoughts, then business is probably not for you. But look, just stay the course. If you know the problem and you're solving the problem, keep solving the problem, and success will follow is the fundamental belief. Without getting too motivational posterish, failure is a state, right? So if you choose to believe that you've failed, then you have failed. And if you don't, you just got to keep going. So the art of the pivot is real. It's important. It's not a stigma. Just keep pivoting until you really solve the problem that you have, and be passionate about it.
Good stuff. No, words of wisdom, mate. And just on that point, for our audience, look, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, and a lot of this is coming through into the service in these really, really uncertain and really strange times. I know a lot of companies have done very, very well, but there's a lot of people under pressure, a lot of people out of work. And in regards to, if you're feeling anxiety, stress, depression, we've had some fantastic speakers on in recent months. We've got some podcasts from those people. By all means, go to Logistics TV. You can drop a mail to me or in the comments, and we'd be happy to connect you up with some people that can help you out in that space. Rob, always a pleasure, mate. You're a legend. Appreciate you coming on. Congratulations on your progress so far. Absolutely. Thanks for your contribution. Really look forward to catching up with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on, Kim. And best of luck with everything, and to everybody else out there.
Thanks, Rob from Shippit, and thanks to our audience for joining us. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks.
Take care. Cheers. Bye.